Hello and welcome back to the State of the League, a series where I, Jack, aka Jokic Joestar, am taking a look at the upcoming NBA season through the eyes of the fans of each team. And today I am taking a look at the Utah Jazz. Unfortunately, I do not have a guest with me today, so instead I'm taking a look at a bunch of surveys that I sent out through Reddit and through Twitter. You can follow me on those platforms if you want to be a part of stuff like this in the future. And the first question that I asked Jazz fans in these surveys was, how do you feel about the state of the Utah Jazz franchise? The responses to this question were a pretty unanimously good feeling about where the Utah Jazz are at as a franchise, and I think that good feeling stems directly from how far ahead of schedule they are into a rebuild, especially when comparing where they thought they were going to be at this time last year with where they currently are. Obviously, that was before Lauri Markkanen had kind of exploded onto the scene as an all-star. That was before they saw how good Walker Kessler could be as a rookie and how he showed out his potential, and especially what he's been able to do in limited run with Team USA and the FIBA tournament as well. The Utah Jazz are still a ways out from being a competitive basketball team that's going to be trying to win meaningful games and make deep playoff runs, but compared to a team like the Washington Wizards, compared to how long it took a team like the Charlotte Hornets to get to where they're at in their rebuild, the Jazz are ahead of schedule, and so it's understandable that the fans are excited, or at least more hopeful than they were at this point last season. The second question I had for fans in this survey was, how do you feel about the moves that the Jazz made this offseason? And the moves were not groundbreaking or going to revolutionize the team in any way, but they did hold on to most of their assets, which is what you really want out of a team that's looking to rebuild the way that the Jazz is. They're obviously not going to be a big free agent destination. They're going to need to build primarily through the draft and being savvy at picking up guys in smart deals throughout the season. So the big couple of moves that they made outside of the draft was picking up John Collins for essentially a second rounder. They also gave up Rudy Gay, who was getting absolutely no playing time for them anyways, and this is a move that I like. In the case that John Collins kind of returns to form to where he once was, you then have a good basketball player, and in the case that he never gets back to that point, you do have a lot of money coming off the books in a couple of years. And then the other move that the Jazz made was holding on to Jordan Clarkson, either re-signing him in free agency or extending his deal. I know it's 3 years for about $55 million, which is also good. It doesn't matter if you're overpaying somebody if you're in the position that the Jazz are going to be over the next several seasons. And if Jordan Clarkson can kind of tap into where he was when he was the sixth man of the year, that's a good tradable contract that a competitive team will give up draft capital to get onto their roster, which is kind of the name of the game if you're the Utah Jazz. The big draft picks that the Jazz made were Taylor Hendricks at 9, who's like a big, super athletic, super mobile forward. He's 6'9", he can dunk, he can do a lot of stuff. Getting a lot of Jeremy Grant, Aaron Gordon comparisons coming out of Baylor, I'm pretty sure, to go along with Keontae George, who showed a lot of flashes of elite play in Summer League, being a nice passer, a nice shooter, stuff that the Jazz really need. And then also Ice Bryce Sensabaugh, who was like the 28th pick in the draft. He had a lot of injury concerns coming out of college, but he also showed out in the Summer League as well. Obviously, the Summer League doesn't really mean that much into how much you're going to be able to contribute for a good basketball team, or even a tanking basketball team for that matter, but the fact that they didn't look bad is good, you know? The third question I had for Jazz fans in these surveys was, how do you feel? What are your expectations heading into next season? And pretty overwhelmingly, the focus was on player development, not on winning games. Nobody cares if they're bad next season as long as the being bad has a purpose as far as getting good draft picks and getting guys that are a part of your future long-term developmental touches goes. So getting guys like Walker Kessler, like Keontae George, getting them comfortable offensively and the ability to grow into the players that Utah needs them to be when the Jazz are ready to be a competitive basketball team. That's what they should be focusing on over the next several seasons, as well as bolstering the trade value of guys that are probably not part of their long-term plans moving forward. I don't expect them to have the same surprising start that they had last season, where they were the 1 seed like 2 or 3 weeks into the season. I think they'll be bad from the jump, and they'll be committed to being bad the entire time. They're going to need higher draft picks than they got last season with like the number 9 and the number 16 picks, stuff like that. You really want to be able to find a guy in the draft who's going to be the best player on a team that is contending for a championship. And for as much as I love Lauri Markkanen, I don't know if he is that player. I think he's more suited to being like a second or maybe even a third option on a super talented team. And I think he's going to be really good for them moving forward, but I think they're going to want to get a first, a second, a third pick in the draft to kind of find that guy. I also don't think they're going to have that surprising start that they had last season because they lost a lot of the major contributors, or a lot of the major contributors are going to have limited minutes. Guys like Kelly Olynyk, Vanderbilt is obviously off the team at this point. There's just a glut of forwards, a lot of guys who need touches. And so I think it's going to be pretty easy for Utah to lose basketball games next season, and I think they will be very committed to that idea of going for a super high draft pick. The fourth question that I had for Jazz fans was, what moves do you want or expect Utah to make towards the trade deadline next season? The one that's been on my mind, I've mentioned his name a couple times in this podcast already, is Kelly Olynyk. I don't really think he makes it past the trade deadline. I think he has skills that a lot of different competitive teams would like to have on the roster in exchange for some sort of asset that would be valuable to a team like the Jazz, who aren't looking to be competitive for the next several years, be it a nice young player, be it draft capital, be it a combination of the two. And looking at this roster, there is just a bit of a log jam in several of the positions. You now have a bunch of forwards and a bunch of guards. You have Colin Sexton, you have Talen Horton-Tucker, you have their pick Hendricks, you have Olynyk, you have Kessler, you have Markkanen, you have all of these players who need to get minutes. There obviously isn't infinity minutes to go around. So I think the trade deadline next season could see the Utah Jazz kind of prioritize their roster in terms of who they want to really keep on moving forward. I probably think that they would move off of guys like Talen Horton-Tucker, who have been in the league a little bit longer and who have shown a little bit less promise, in favor of their guys that they just drafted and have a little bit higher ceiling, at least unknown potential. Even if they don't end up working out, I think it's more likely that they work out than a guy that we've seen get the opportunity and not really thrive in it in Utah with Talen Horton-Tucker, although I could be wrong. There's a lot of basketball to be played before this point, so I think more than me having an idea of who will be on the roster past the trade deadline next season, I think they are just going to have to make some decisions in that regard with whoever they go with. The fifth question I had for Jazz fans in this survey was a custom one just for these Jazz fans, and that was the fact that Lauri Markkanen is 26 years old and your team is a solid 3 or 4 years out from competing. How do you feel about the idea of Utah maybe moving off of him for somebody who fits their timeline better while his value is still super, super high the way Markkanen's is right now? Or do you think that Utah is going to move forward with the idea of him being a franchise centerpiece that they're trying to win a championship or build a super good playoff team around? The resounding question to this answer was yes, and understandably so. It's not often that a player checks both boxes of being as good as Markkanen is and being committed to playing in Utah and loving the city of Salt Lake the way that Markkanen pretty clearly does. He's happy to be there. He's happy that they took a chance on him and that he has been able to thrive and move forward into his career. The way that it was kind of stagnating in Cleveland has not nearly been the same in Utah. He obviously exploded into a really, really good player last season, which you love to see. More than anything, the answers to this question just kind of showed me how much Utah fans love Lauri Markkanen, and I get that too. It's also really nice that Utah fans were probably prepared to go without a player the caliber of Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell for a while after they moved off of both of those players last offseason, and for Lauri to immediately come in and step into that role and fill that void on the team, that just kind of contributes to the love that Utah has for this player. So, yes, front office and fans both want to move forward with him being one of, if not the best players on their team by the time the roster around him gets competitive. As somebody who is removed from the Utah atmosphere, I love Lauri Markkanen. I love what he is as a player and what he has the capacity to be, although I think moving forward with him as one of your best players, if he's 26 and nobody else on the team is remotely close to where you need them to be in order for the team to get super competitive, it doesn't give you a very long time, or I should say it doesn't give you a ton of wiggle room as far as your rebuild goes. If you are ready to go in 4 years, which it's a good plan for the Utah Jazz to be there, it doesn't give you the ability to miss on a draft pick. It doesn't give any of your draft picks a ton of wiggle room as far as like stagnating in their development goes. Everything needs to go very smoothly for this team to line up with Lowry's prime and the roster around him being good enough to make a very deep playoff run. And even if that works out, I'm not sold on it being super long. Even if Lowry ages gracefully into the 34, 35-year-old range, plays like an all-star that entire time, I'm not sure if they have more than 3 or 4 deep playoff runs in them, and I'm not sold on any of those being like legitimate championship title runs. I think you need to get those high draft picks over the next couple of seasons, and you need to hit on a prospect being a really, really, really good guy pretty much right off the bat. Like I touched on earlier, I'm not sold on Lowry being a number one on a championship contender kind of player, even though he's really good at a bunch of different stuff on the court. I think he's better suited to being that second option. And so if Utah finds that guy over the next couple of years and he steps into that role of being the number one and kind of has like an Anthony Edwards-esque development where by the time he's 22, 23 years old, they're ready to make that jump into being a competitive basketball team, that would rock. I'm not ruling that option out at all. I just think it's not a guarantee. But then again, nothing in sports is. And so Utah fans, I'm sorry if I sound like a hater here. This is just a concern that has been in the back of my mind since Lowry kind of blew up last season, is that his timeline does not really sync with Utah's at all. But if it works, it works. I will happily be wrong about something like this. I wish him the best. I wish Utah the best. I like it when small markets succeed with cool, unique players like Lauri Markkanen. And so, yeah, like I said, I'll happily be wrong. The sixth and final question I had for Jazz fans in this survey was, which player are you most looking forward to seeing develop next season? And when you have a roster full of young, exciting guys who have a lot of potential like Utah does, you're going to get varied responses to this question. I think I received 5 or 6 total different players. I'm going to run through them all. Keyonte George, who I already touched on, is a young, exciting guard who showed out in Summer League. The Utah Jazz fans are hoping that he becomes somewhat of the passer, facilitator, and shooter that this team needs from the guard position. They didn't really have that last season, and it definitely limited them in what they were able to do offensively, although towards the end of the season, they weren't really trying to win games anyways. Taylor Hendricks is a 6'9", 250-ish pound forward who is getting a lot of Aaron Gordon comps. Like I already mentioned, he's a stupid athlete. I think his floor is really, really good defensively, and his ceiling is stupid to think about. I think he will be very impactful pretty much immediately on that end of the floor, and a lot of his mechanics on the offensive end look good. I'm not sure how well they're going to translate in terms of the efficiency from beyond the three-point arc or things like that, but at the bare minimum, he should be able to be a factor around the rim. He should be able to catch lobs. He should be able to get rebound putbacks, things like that, especially if you have a high motor, which he seems to have coming out of college. You can be impactful if you're that kind of athlete and you're that size. However, he did miss Summer League, and I think that's kind of a contributing factor to the lack of buzz around him compared to somebody like Keyonte George, who had a phenomenal Summer League and is looking to be really good for the Jazz, or the Jazz fans are hoping that he will be really good, I suppose. Obviously, Walker Kessler was a really, really good rookie defensively last season. He was getting a lot of comparisons to Gobert because he was so good at protecting the rim, and he was playing for the team that Gobert just departed from. He's been pretty good for Team USA in limited minutes. He's He's averaging like 1.5 blocks per game in like 7 minutes of play, which is ridiculous. I'm not really sure what his blocks totals are. He might have just gotten a lot in one game, and then that average kind of like flattens itself out over time. But regardless, he was super good last season, and a lot of Jazz fans are hoping that he will take a second year jump. Two of my favorite answers to this question were one, Colin Sexton. People are kind of hoping that he can return to where he was when he averaged nearly 25 points per game for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I am one of those people. I loved him in college at Alabama. I loved what he was doing for Cleveland. I loved that game where he single-handedly ripped out the hearts of the Brooklyn Nets, the Kyrie Harden, KD Nets, where he just hit like 4 or 5 straight three-pointers to absolutely ice the game down the stretch. That was ridiculous. He's a fun, exciting player. It's always cool when a guy that size can get into the lane and be such a effective acrobatic finisher the way that Colin Sexton is, and he's obviously super exciting to watch operate in the mid-range as well. I'm not sold on him having a career resurgence to that level that he was at in Cleveland, but if it happened, that would be spectacular, both for Utah and for the league. I love watching Colin Sexton play basketball. And then my other favorite answer was Chris Dunn, who flashed a fair bit of potential at 28 years old last season. He was a promising young guy when he was in Chicago. Then he went to Atlanta and stuff didn't really pan out his way. He wound up in Utah, and last season he averaged like 13, 6, and 4 on really good efficiency. His three-point shot was limited in terms of sample size. I think he only played like 40 games or so, but he was shooting about 47% from 3 in that span. I don't think he's immediately become one of the best three-point shooters in the league, but if he could maintain that level of play while being the defensive guy that he was earlier on in his career, and I think that would be a good asset for Utah to maybe move on to a more competitive roster in exchange for a nice chunk of draft capital. The idea of Chris Dunn as like a 50, 40, 90-ish guy on small scoring while being a nice facilitator and a good defender, that's something that a lot of teams would love to add to their roster, myself included. I would not mind that coming off the bench for the Denver Nuggets whatsoever. And then one of the more underrated picks for the Utah Jazz was a guy named Ochai Agbaji, I think. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. He only averaged 8 points per game last season, but he's a nice guard with good physical tools. He's 6'5", got a really big wingspan. And through the final 20-25 games, he really started to hit his stride offensively as far as scoring the basketball goes, bumping that up to nearly 14 or 15 points per game while being fairly efficient and a good defender, stuff like that, or at least having the ceiling of a good defender. I haven't watched a ton of film on him, but he came up 5 separate times in these surveys as far as Jazz fans are concerned, so I think he's a guy to watch out for in the future. And that is all I have for you on the Utah Jazz today. I'm excited to watch them next season. I think you could still have fun while being a bad basketball team, and I think Lauri Markkanen is definitely going to be fun to watch next year. And so thank you guys for listening. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.